Hello, Bayesian Conspiracy listeners. This is Kyle, the sound editor and sound designer of this podcast. A while back, we asked you, our listeners, if you could help us create a new musical intro and outro for the show. We'd like to thank you all so much for your submissions, and for all the other wonderful contributions made to our podcast by the rationalist community at large. Today, we'd like to introduce these new listener-created compositions, which will permanently replace our old, yet beloved, heavy metal track. Our new intro theme music, which you will hear at the conclusion of this announcement, is composed by David Groovier, who also did some composition for Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Our outro music was composed by the dynamic duo Sumerki and Keeper. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber, and today we have a guest.
But first, we are going to do listener feedback. We're doing listener feedback at the top today because the guest is a little bit late, but we will introduce him as soon as he gets here.
Gotcha.
Before we get into actual listener feedback, I want to do a host opinion update.
I'm ready.
Okay, so couple months ago now, I think we had the marriage episode. Where I came out as basically against marriage in all its current present-day forms, and I got some, feedback. People have talked to me a bit, both through IM and through messages on Reddit and stuff about it, and I am moderating my position slightly. I think that there is a place for marriage when it comes to one person staying at home and taking care of the kids and being the homemaker, because there is for both parents to work and have to pay for someone to be the homemaker and to take care of the kids is really expensive, and that is something that you can do if you make a lot of money. But in a recent post on, oh god, I forgot the blog it is, but the name of the post is Seizing the Means of Home Production. It just pointed out that it can be really economically useful to team up with another person and split these tasks where one person works outside the home, the other person works inside the home to raise the kids, keep things running. And there's a lot of other crap that goes on with keeping a household running, more than just than cleaning and keeping kids. There's the taxes, there's all sorts of running down to City Hall whenever that needs to be done. There's a lot of chores which I have to do myself, which is a pain in the ass. Right now, my car is overdue on maintenance because I haven't had fucking time to go and do it. And if I had someone in the house that had some extra time every now and then to help me out with that kind of stuff, that'd be really useful. Someone else wrote me saying that...
How's that tie into marriage?
Well, and someone else wrote me and said that, her and her husband both had strong careers, but they really wanted kids. And so she, due to the protections that marriage gives, she felt comfortable quitting her job and raising the kids instead. And that's fair, because when you go into a partnership with someone, you need some assurance that they're not going to just punk out on you after 5 years if you guys have decided to go into this for a long time, because you are giving up a lot of income, and not only that, but a lot of work experience and resume building when you're staying home instead. And so that is a valuable thing.
So that empty box that Nazim talked about, that's where the marriage is. It's a box with high walls that makes it hard to get out. So the benefit the protection that you're mentioning there is the insulation from like an easy dissolving of the relationship.
Well, no,
saying, look, I'm getting everything up to do this, and like my life track, or I guess both of our life tracks, kind of depend on this not falling apart in the next 5 years. Let's lock this down with some legal work. Is that what you're saying?
No, because I don't think that people should have a harder time getting out of a relationship they aren't happy with. I think, if anything, that should be easier, because there's already a lot of psychological barriers to it. But I do think that if someone does give up their career, then it is good for there to be, like, honestly, I think of it more of an LLC kind of thing. You and someone else have teamed up, and there is some assurances that even if you do dissolve this LLC, that you won't be left destitute. You will have access to half the resources that you guys together created, because even though one person was working outside the home to bring in actual cash money, the person working inside the home was contributing as well. That's why you formed this LLC with the other person, to take advantage of their labor without having to pay someone to do it. So yeah, getting half the stuff and then getting some not severance, but that's sort of after you've been let go from a job, they keep paying you out for a while to transition for your transition. That, I think that sort of thing makes a lot of sense. And I just hate the fact that it is called marriage and it is tied to having your relationship being respected by society. And if you are in love, you are considered supposed to get that. And I think all that is total bullshit. So from now on, I am going to refer to all marriage as homemaker protection contracts. And that is because that is the legitimate use for them. And I think that is what they should be called. And right now, my sister is going to be entering into a homemaker protection contract with someone, which I think is stupid, because both of them are both of them are going to continue working outside the house. No one is staying home to raise kids and make home because they don't want to do that. So I don't know why they're getting a homemaker protection contract when...
Well, sure. When you rebrand it that way, then it sounds stupid, right?
Yes. So, but that is my direct intention. So yeah, if someone is staying home to be a homemaker, good on you. Get a homemaker protection contract. But otherwise, I think it's silly.
Well, that's nice to hear an update. I don't know. My general feedback or my general thoughts on it are like, it makes sense to protect yourself from bad situations, just like you don't want to enter into a lease with somebody who has broken 6 leases in the past or something, right? Because then, your chances of being fucked are pretty high. But if they have a good lease history and you can check their relationship credit score and it comes out great, then I don't know. I guess ruining the metaphor, I think that if you calculate the risk to be super low, and most people, I rated that most people don't even calculate the risk. They just think this is what people do. We get married and I got to lock this down.
Yeah, that's the problem.
But to the extent that any thinking person is getting married and they have the time and energy to like consider the question, is this a risk to my future? And the answer is most likely no. Then it's like, if it makes one person happy or makes both of you a little happy or whatever, then I don't know.
Yeah, but it's always a risk. And that was my same thinking with my last marriage, because I was already kind of against marriage, but it made her happy. And if I had just thought of it as homemaker protection contracts, I would have been like, no, we don't need to do that. And I think I'm going to keep doing that, because that's basically their legitimate function, in my opinion. There will always be some risk involved, and that is a risk you're willing to take if you're getting a homemaker, life partner out of the deal.
Maybe it's not scary to me because I don't have any stuff. Like,
oh well,
if I don't have a life savings or a house, then
yeah,
great.
Whatever.
You can have half of my 1999 Honda Accord.
Are you planning to have no stuff for the rest of your life, though?
I don't know. I mean, when in doubt, bet like the future being like the past, right? So,
cool.
No, I plan to have stuff. We're trying to buy a place, but yeah, no, I hear you. It's something to think about, and it's nice to have a moderate move back. I don't know if we put this in the air or not, but after the recording when we did that episode, Naveen asked if there was anything that you had. If you'd get married under any circumstances.
Yeah, you did mention this, I think, the next episode.
Oh, good, because I thought that was awesome. So it wasn't like you were just like, no, I hate it forever and it's bad for everybody.
Right.
So it showed that at least I thought about it. So cool. All right, what else we got?
All right, on to actual listener feedback.
Oh, wait, we should thank our supporter as well before I forget. To thank our awesome sound engineer, Kyle Moore, who makes this sound like audible chocolate in your ears, as opposed to like a cheese grater ruining like a record. I don't know. He can't make that sound any better, but he can make it. He can't make the words sound any better, but he can make the sound better.
Yeah. Oh, well, what was the name so I can add it to our list that you guys thanked last week when I wasn't here?
The most recent one that.
Yeah, it was like two first names, right? Like Chris Johnson.
That sounds right. I'll find it.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can thank the next person.
Okay. This week we would like to thank our Patreon supporter Stefan Abs, or possibly Stephen Abs, and I'm assuming it's abs. It's ABS. Yeah.
Sounds right to me.
Hope the guy has great abs, because otherwise. Is it Stefan or Steven? I guess I should ask him.
Yeah, I mean, Steph, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, it does. We want to say your name right. Hopefully it's one of those two things. We really appreciate your help. It makes everything awesome and keeps the lights on over here. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Keep going.
So the second to last episode that came out, so we recorded these, how we mentioned it before, we kind of lead some in advance. So 2 episodes ago, we did one with Vivian on it didn't turn out to be what it was going to be about, but then what it actually ended up being about was just like, I don't know, how to try to think sanely about privilege and social justice warriorism and that sort of stuff. And we got a lot of feedback, kind of like this comment on the website from Pink Wojak that said, "I found the double think required to understand privilege unbearable. Please don't do that again." And there was one of the most active subreddit conversations on there. And by all means, go check it out and add stuff.
Ooh, as long as we're on both the subreddit and privilege, should I read Ustis's comment about privilege?
Yeah, go nuts.
Okay. Ustis on the subreddit talked about privilege. Ustis says, "I really dislike the term privilege because it has a different meaning in colloquial terms versus how it's used in sociological context. This isn't very unlike theory, as in the scientific model term, as opposed to how people use theory in day-to-day talk like..."
To mean hunch.
Yeah, it's my theory that your spark plugs need to be replaced. Anyways, Ustis says, "Privilege, from a sociological perspective, can be looked at simply as a set of problems that a particular group of people simply doesn't have to deal with just by being a member of that particular group of people. A poor white person has a much lower chance of being pulled over if they drive through a neighborhood predominantly populated by a different racial group. Just by being white, they have a higher chance of being considered for a job. Typically, when someone is saying that a person is privileged, they aren't dismissing that person. They are pointing out how they are being dismissed by the person's unawareness. Rather, they are pointing out how they are being dismissed by the other person's unawareness of the kinds, severity, and frequency of problems that they're talking about." And my feedback on this is that I totally agree with that. And this is one of the problems with talking to everyone else in the world, is that privilege does have a distinct technical meaning in academia, one that is entirely reasonable and that you can't really argue against. You're like, yes, this is a thing that really exists and it really does make life easier if you're white. But that is not how it's used out in the real world. In academia, in that rarefied atmosphere where you're only talking with other people that know these sorts of things and that are fairly reasonable about this sort of thing, I should hope. Some of the news stories you see out of colleges makes me wonder about that nowadays. But in those places, yeah, that's a good way to use it. But out in the non-academic world where I hang around with a fair handful of SJW types, I usually see it as shorthand for why it's okay to denigrate or attack a person or a group. It's because, like, well, you're a white person, you have privilege, and therefore it's okay for me to call you a piece of shit or whatever it is.
Right.
And that is how most people outside academia see it being used, which is why I think it has got this sort of backlash, because you're using it as an excuse to punch people. If we go back to the punching analogy, you're like, you're white, you're privileged, I don't care about you, I don't care about your life circumstances, I don't care if you just got, well, I was about to say I don't care if you just got raped last weekend. They probably would care, but the point is they don't know what your life is. They just know that you're white, and therefore it's okay to be an asshole to you or to, like, punch at you.
Well, and that's, I mean, and I get the terminology, and someone would say, well, it's not actually punching, but as long as we're using that phrase, like, just don't, why are people throwing punches in the first place? And I get, like, we come from positions of privilege in the academic sense, to where it's easy to say why we're not throwing punches, because we haven't been pushed to that extreme, maybe. But at the same time, was it one of the commenters? I'm trying to remember how to pronounce the name. It was like, give me a second. Sorry.
Mordanamail?
Yeah, Morden Amail.
Yeah, I mean, they had a lot of good comments.
That's your bad for making it hard to say. I'm pretty sure I know who this is. So, but I think that's basically a tactic of like a Mott and Bailey, right? Have we talked about that in the podcast before?
No. Should we cover Mott and Bailey quickly?
I think we should.
Okay. Mott and Bailey was introduced by Scott Alexander as in terms of the analogy, in old medieval cities, the Bailey is the area around the area in a settlement where useful work is done. It's where the stables are, where the blacksmith is. There's probably don't have the storehouses of grains. But anyways, it's the place where economic work gets done, where everyone actually does the life, where things happen. And the Bailey is like the big tower in the center that's super well fortified. And you want the motte because that's where things get done. But when someone comes by and you need to defend yourself, everyone retreats to the Bailey. They rain arrows down upon the invaders until they leave. Until then they can go, or everyone goes up into the motte. Have I been saying this backwards?
I honestly don't know. So I don't.
The motte is the big tower.
Okay.
The Bailey is where the useful work is done.
That's fine.
Everyone goes up into the motte. They stay there. They're fortified. And then once the enemy leaves, they go out to the Bailey again. And in the analogy is the motte is something like the way privilege was said here. That privilege is that a group, a series of problems you don't have because you're in a certain group. Like you won't get pulled over by the cops for driving through a neighborhood. And that is true and unassailable. And everyone says, yes, that's true. But that is not where the useful work of the term privilege usually gets done. When we see the work that the word privilege does, it's always in reasons to
ignore people or shit on them.
Exactly. And like, to tell people to shut up and get out of here.
I feel like the best way to explain this analogy, so the motte is the defensible one, the Bailey is the not defensible one.
Yes.
All right, so like the motte of like feminism is like, we just want equality for women. Yeah. It's like everybody wants that. Anyone who doesn't want that is obviously a shitbag. Mm-hmm. But the movement may have been hijacked by people, who will, the second you say like, hey, look, why are you shitting on trans women? Like TERFs, like we talked about in that episode. And they're like, well, fuck them. They're not real women or whatever their bullshit arguments are. And then you say, well, your whole thing is nonsense. Then like, no, all we care about is equality for women. And so I think, people will deploy that when attacked and then move back to not using that steel version of the position and then just attack with bullshit situations.
Yeah. In fact, I just found Morn Mail's thing about that, post about that, if you want me to read it real quickly. Okay. Statements like men have more social power are very susceptible to motte and Bailey shell games. Consider men are taller than women. In colloquial usage, this means statistically speaking, the mean height of men is higher than the mean height of women. Everyone knows you don't mean 100% of men are taller than 100% of women because everyone is very aware of the actual fact of the matter here. And everyone is aware that everyone is aware, etc. So there's a low risk of being misunderstood. Now consider men have more social power. True, but boring. The median man can get away with more BS than the median woman. Also, the most powerful humans tend to be men. Here's the false but highly inflammatory, yet frequently asserted as truth statement. All men are more powerful than all women. In some vague sense. Yes, even a poor disabled minority has more social power than Sarah Palin because he's a man. Somehow. That's how privilege works. Stop asking clarifying questions.
That reads a lot like Scott Alexander.
Yeah, and so the true but boring meaning is true but boring. That's the motte. Most men would readily admit to it because it frankly doesn't mean a whole lot. Yeah, I suppose in the history of the world, that's how things have turned out. The second assertion, the Bailey, is a falsehood. Why defend a falsehood? Why commit a falsehood in the first place? Does the position that men should be more sensitive to the historical roots of present-day inequalities require that we assert a falsehood? I hope not. And yeah, that's the thing. The Bailey is like a falsehood that does a lot of work, but isn't defensible.
And I find that like
you switch back and forth between them whenever you need to defend your statement.
Exactly, and I don't like that approach. And I might do it in real life. I'm not sure. If you ever see me doing it, call me out on it because it'd be interesting to see what it feels like. But from the outside, it feels dishonest.
Yeah.
And I know people in real life. We heard the doorbell. So bink.
Yeah, remember what you were saying?
Just that in real life, when people discuss privilege, they are equipped with the proper definition, but that's not how it's usually employed.
Yeah.
And so if you ask them to be like, well, can you explain that? They'll give you the academic version, but then they'll go right back to not using it that way.
Yeah.
In my experience.
And the switch is always on the sly between the motte and the Bailey, which is what makes it such an effective tactic.
Yeah. So that said, we did the listener feedback first. We're jumping back to doing the actual episode now. So check out the subreddit for that episode for some engaging conversation.
Wait, but there were two other things that possibly we can engage before we jump into Josh's thing?
Yeah, go nuts.
Okay,
you're
cool.
welcome to jump in here whenever you want.
I was going to say, when we talked about the punching thing and you asked why are we punching anything, punching is very similar. The first time I heard it, and I think this is where it originated, though I'm not sure, it was a term used by comedians that you're allowed to make fun of the president because he's the fucking president. You can't hurt the president. He's up there. He's got a lot of power, and they called that like punching up at the president. You can mock him all you want. But if you're like mocking the disabled black person in your audience, that's a shit thing to do. Don't do that. He's below you in his station in life, and that's why you don't punch down, which was where I believe that term originated from comedy.
It could be.
Punching up is funny, punching down is a dick move.
Also, like roasting would be funny to do with people who are on board, or like, even somebody who maybe isn't on board but is socially equipped to take the reputational hit from being made fun of.
Yeah.
But you don't grab some random person and start shitting on them like roast style.
Right.
So,
and then the term gets co-opted by the larger society, and now all of a sudden anyone who you think is above you in social privilege or status or whatever, you can rip on for whatever reason.
I'm also just not a big fan, and I mentioned this to Eustace on the I had seen this mentioned to Eustace on the subreddit. If this was 50 years ago and DNA tests were readily available and people were say like an Italian person, this is back when they were less equal in society in America, if they were punching up at somebody and then, it looks like 3 out of their 4 grandparents were non-Italian white or something, then like, are they doing the wrong thing? Like, it depends. If they're not really Italian, but maybe if they thought they were, I feel like you can avoid a lot of that thinking by just not throwing punches, period. Yeah. But again, I recognize that I say that from my positions. I if there's something there to be had, there probably is, but I just feel like you also don't make friends that way. And I don't know. I loved Eustace's comments. They were very long and thoughtful, but I didn't find my mind changed. But I did find them engaging, and they're a nice way to analyze this. If things weren't clear in the episode, I thought they were very clear in those comments.
I think he has, I think they have some very good points, and I like what they have to say. This is why we engaged, everyone, right?
Yeah.
Because there are many sides to the stories. Finally, Morn de Mial, also on the subreddits. We gotta find out how that name's pronounced. I couldn't help but apply a Hansonian lens while listening. Can't imagine why. Essentially, every culture war topic, almost any tough topic, is something that doesn't matter. More concretely, your weighing in on the issue on Facebook, Twitter, or in person accomplishes almost nothing. At most, you will slightly change one mind via several hours of effort. Mostly, it's about tribal signaling. You're showing off your allegiance to the tribe. The left literally uses the term ally, and your quality as an ally is judged on the basis of your unquestioning compliance. Hard to get more tribal than that. And the right has their version as well of things that you are. Oh God, there was a great article about not politically correct, patriotically correct was what it was called. That there are certain things that you can't say when you're on the right, even if you think them, because then all the people on your side will be like, are you one of those hippies, liberal tards that, yeah.
Because arguments are soldiers arguments are soldiers and conversation is war, right?
Right.
So anything that you say that is the least bit besmirching of your own side, if you're like, hey guys, maybe slow down here for a second, then it's like, oh my God, he's fighting against us. He's shooting our own soldiers in the back. Get him.
Yeah.
And I think I don't really know the way to approach that without getting too into it, other than like just to not care. But assuming that you do care, which a lot of people care about stuff, maybe I'm weird in that I don't. Then I don't know what the remedy is for that. Maybe being aware of the fact that like it's okay to say your side can do better, maybe, or that
just being willing to talk with other people, and not shit on them, and realize that you don't have to convert everyone all the time. Just talk with people and have a civil conversation. They're humans too, even if they may be wrong. Being wrong is not a sin.
Relating to that, I really enjoyed the recent episode on Sam Harris's podcast with Christian something, I forget his last name.
Oh, Paolini? The ex Hitler Youth guy, right?
Christopher Paolini was the author of the Inheritance Cycle book series.
I met him at DCC. He's the nicest motherfucker you'll ever meet.
Not a white supremacist then.
No.
So Christopher on the Sam Harris podcast was a reformed neo-Nazi, and it was a very intense conversation. It was a lot of fun. He had been out for 20 years, out of the movement, and he's been writing books against it and helping other people escape that culture. But man, as far as reaching out and talking to people, that was one of the themes that he was trying to push.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very good conversation.
Yeah. Would you like to? It sounded like you were going to jump in, say something.
kind of actually makes me think about some of the things I went through with talking to people back home with the idea of conversation. And so, but what I mentioned to you in a message about regarding keeping to the conversation about last week's podcast, privilege works well for consciousness raising of the majority. I don't know if you touched on this yet.
Not really.
Probably not. No.
But you don't get to punch sideways. Like if you're going to, you don't have. I mentioned like you don't have, a Jewish female punching, Hispanic female punching, and an African American female punching, a gay Native American male. This doesn't work. It only functions well for bringing to the attention of the majoritarian groups in society their attention. So this idea of conversation is it back to the Trump thing, or dealing with people back in West Virginia and Appalachia more generally, is getting past the idea that we have to have debates and we have to win. We have actually conversation, and the point is to build community. And so there's no point in winning if you lose the community in the process. And I like what you said about conversation being war. It doesn't have to be. I mean, like it can be intense, but it could also be just general bonding.
Mm-hmm. For clarification, that's a popular quote from a Less Wrong blog post, or from a Less Wrong blog post series on politics as the mind killer. So that particular line's repeated a lot. So it's sort of tongue in cheek. I didn't. Right. That wasn't me.
I'm just in the one. At least you mentioned it, and I liked it. And so that's. I know I have a hard time with the way we talk about privilege, because I think what I came into in the middle of was what you were saying about. There's the academic use, and then there's the application. Mm-hmm. And we move back and forth between them without actually having. There's too much slippage. Slippage is the word? Slippage. Too much slippage. And that's where it gets troublesome for me. And talking to people all the time about this issue, like where you're bringing up in last week also, is that telling a white Appalachian male that he's privileged is missing a lot of the intersectionality of what that person goes through. And what's also funny to me is when you get into intersectionality is that Ayn Rand brought this stuff up.
Really?
She talked about the greatest minority is the individual. And if you continue breaking down this identity politics, pre-identity politics, much as I'm not an Ayn Rand fan, but when a woman hits something, you gotta, but mainly, yes, that idea of following every different group you could possibly fall into. And then at the end of the day, you're going to be just the individual you are. And I guess my last thought on this would be, did you ever read the philosophy essay? I think it was by Nigel, I don't know how to say his last name.
Probably not.
It was back in like the 70s, called What's It Like to Be a Bat?
That was Thomas Nagel.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
You have read that one, right?
Yeah. It's a short essay. It's worth reading.
It's very short. But the main concept was, at least my takeaway years ago, was that we'll never know what it's like to be a bat, as a bat knows how it is to be a bat. We only know as a human how a human would interpret being a bat. And I think that we should also understand that as a person, I will only understand a female or an African American or a Native American or someone who doesn't speak English as a primary language, a person who didn't go to college, only through my experience of trying to empathize. And so much of our arguments and so much of our communication is based on the assumption that you will understand me completely. You will hold my assumptions. And that's where I think the concept of privilege, the concept of conversation as war gets muddy. Those aren't true. People do not understand my assumptions. They do not. I only know what I know because what I've read and what I've seen. And I can only touch the differences of other people's lives, through analogies, and we know how bad those can be for understanding the world.
Yeah. So the reason we brought you here today,
That's actually a good segue.
Yeah.
Reaching across to talk to people.
We should introduce you, because I don't think we did yet. You are Joshua.
I am Joshua.
Are you okay going with Joshua on the podcast?
I am.
Okay, great.
And that reminds me, anything that you want us to take out, if you think of it a couple days later, shoot one of us a message, or probably Josh, if you're already in touch. And, there'll be no gotchas. No, you said it. Sorry, it's going out. There's, whatever you want is good. So if you're like, you know what, I regret saying this thing or something or whatever, Yeah. Do you want to just do like an intro?
Yeah,
And
Joshua, the reason
we'll time warp back and start the podcast and do the thing.
the reason I wanted Joshua on the podcast is because
We
over the
didn't
past
do like the welcome to the Bayesian conspiracy thing.
we'll do that at the end.
Okay.
Okay. The reason we over the past few months, I saw a number of posts on Facebook of yours where you kind of went into what do I want to say? Went into deep cover, went back into Trump country, basically, and really, because you originally were from Alabama, right?
No,
No,
not Alabama, West Virginia,
West Virginia.
which is even more Trump country.
Okay. I was going to
Isn't
say
that like the coal mine place? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Alright.
but it's more of the, give an example real quick, is that all 55 counties went Trump.
okay.
And in the primaries, all 55 counties on the Democratic side went Bernie.
Okay.
So
very
there's no
populist
Hillary
area.
love. So it is completely Trump.
And yeah, you got out, I believe, and went to college somewhere. Got out as in
Well, the story was I wanted to be a musician, so I went to Atlanta first. So I went from a town with 2 traffic lights, and one was at a 3-way because there was a gas station.
okay.
So 1,600 people at most at the time, graduating class of 69 kids. And I take off for a town that has, I don't know, let's say 1,000 traffic lights.
Atlanta?
at least six lanes going in on 85. And so my car was just rattling the entire time. So point being, it was a world change. And I knew I wanted to be in a city. I knew I needed to be where the action was, because when I was in high school, middle high school, I started like 10th or 11th grade, this guy came in. He actually was a friend of he actually owned Willie Nelson's ex-wife's guitar. He was a songwriter, and I volunteered to help the FFA, do this big dinner so I could get to meet this man.
What's FFA?
Future Farmers of America.
Okay.
And
That is something
it's very big where I'm from.
Yeah.
It's
Having been raised in Denver my whole life, I would not have known those acronyms.
You get hogs. The school sponsors it. You raise them, or not just hogs, but cattle, beef, whatever it may be, and then you slaughter at the end of the year.
Wow.
And you have a big sell. I mean, there's also we adopt highways. We learn how to deal with just general maintenance of a farm, but just agriculture on an industrial level too.
Okay.
There's classes in it.
Yeah.
So more of the point was this guy told me, I waited around to the very end of this dinner and this speech that he gave, and I said, I want to be a songwriter, I want to be a musician. And he said, well, you can't hunt tigers if there are no tigers to be found. And that meant you had to go to Nashville or LA or someplace that people were writing songs and playing music. And stumbled across Atlanta, had a music scene that better to be a big fish in a small pond type of thing early on. So with that, and then I did that for a year, and that was for the purpose of conversation. I was there for being a musician, going to music school, and I found myself, but in the evenings, speaking with bassists and drummers from all different levels in the program. And the thing musicians talk about more than anything else, politics and religion. And
It's not what I would have expected musicians to talk
that's
about.
what we talk about, politics and religion. And there's one dude to talk about baseball. But I'm a Mets fan, so I don't care about the Braves. So with that, I found myself saying, well, where I'm from, or back home, we do this. And one day this bass player said, well, son, we ain't back home. And with an accent and so on. And it was really a moment of I want to have an opinion. So I went to college. I dropped out of music school to go to get a 4-year degree so I could have an opinion, because I felt that I wasn't informed enough. And so conversation led me to realize how much I was missing in communicating with other people. And then I went to undergrad, did a bunch of different, whatever classes interested me, took that kind of thing. But I eventually graduated with my degree in economics, and 2 minors just shy of majors in English and history. And then I went to DC, worked in think tank, and then moved out here for grad school in economics.
Nice.
So that's how I'm out here. And so when I went back home,
Yeah. This was about a year after, less than a year, 10 months after Trump had been elected?
yes, actually it was November.
Okay.
So but as far as he inaugurated. So I went back home for 7 weeks. I was fortunate to be able to work remotely, and my grandmother was having some health issues, and so I went back home, stayed with her, and helped her get to the hospital and back and forth. But so I was like, the one thing I found with Trump was how much even I misunderstood the people I grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were like, these are my people. I mean, like, I listen to the same music still. I mean, I still listen to country music, not the stuff radio, but like, the 90s and so on. But we listen, the metal music, watching these guys on Facebook who are metalheads are these huge Trump supporters, and they're gun guys now. And I'm like, where did this happen? Where were the women who were the spoken members of our class voted Trump? Like, what's going on? Like, things didn't line up in my mind. And I found myself getting very humble by the process. I spent the 5 months after Trump's getting elected pretty much just like, laying around the house, not reading anything. Like, I was just like, give me a shelter. but with that, because I actually give a prognosis of this. So I read quite a bit. And so the year 2015, I read 67 books for that year. And then went up until Trump got elected, I had 46 read. And then in the next 5 months, I did not complete a single book. It was that kind of emotional impact. Yeah. And so when I went back home, basically I start hashtagging like report from rural America or something of that nature. And just asking people, it wasn't about like, I need to win an argument. It wasn't about understanding the statistics or saying, here, look at these numbers, or here is textbook economics. It was, tell me your narrative. Explain to me why you believe the way you believe, and what are your examples. And you don't be antagonistic. And I think the one thing that when you first was actually an issue over regarding Me Too movement and sexual harassment in the workplace, I think that was the first time you commented to me about any of this.
Okay.
If you want to hear a little bit about that.
I didn't see this exchange, so is there anything to dive into there that's not too far derailing?
No, there's no real exchange. It was just more, I posted a thing about a quote from a woman I spoke to.
Yeah,
and he mentioned like, we should talk when you get back type of thing.
And we haven't talked yet.
not on this topic. Yeah.
Right on.
And so basically what I found was talking to some of these women, particularly who work in the poultry plants or the cabinet factories around my area, was one thing that was mentioned, like, the women are just as bad, if not worse, than the men when it comes to sexual harassment.
Okay. Now, as in harassing men or harassing other women?
Both.
Okay.
And it's actually because this woman actually said that she's like, she's very much like, I don't care if you're a lesbian. I know, and that's how she prefaced it. But when I put a ring on my finger, behave like the men and don't start trying to entice me to cheat on my husband. The women were not stopping when it came to that aspect of her coworkers. But when you bring in just a new manager, or you bring in another guy, I mean, I worked in these plants for 2 summers, and I kind of have to verify what she said seems pretty accurate. I mean, even when I worked in the hospital, I worked in a mental hospital in my undergrad, the women were very aggressive. A new guy shows up, and it's like, I want that one. And they're at a lunch table like choosing, and they're very physical. They'll touch you without asking. They will entice you, and even if you have a kid at home and a wife. I mean, and my grandfather actually told me, because I mentioned this to him, that this conversation I had. He's like, yeah, we actually had this new guy come in, a manager brought in from corporate, and the vice president, not vice president, but one of the upper management, had to go to the lunchroom and tell all these women, this man has 3 kids at home, he's here to work. And so what the point is, even knowing the statistics, and this is the point I'm trying to get to, is even knowing the statistics about sexual harassment in the workplace, it doesn't line up with these people's reality. What they're seeing is something different. And so what I learned in this is you can't win an argument with statistics. It's about narrative. It's about making people feel heard, and it's about making and the thing also is funny. It's like, not funny, but none of them are advocating for it. Like, no one said we need to keep it the same. No one says we need, men and women should be able to sexually harass anyone in a workplace. It should be a sexual harassment-free zone. No one's disagreeing with the same thing the Me Too movement's asking for. But the fact that they make a narrative, or the movement has made a narrative about women only, these women are responding with, I'm not a victim, and also women are just as bad. When are we going to take care of them? And that's what fascinated me, was just hearing these kind of stories.
On a brief tangent, you said something which surprised me, and which I guess now I'm connecting the two things that they might be related. You said that the women that you talked to said there was impossible to find any good men anymore.
Oh, okay, that's a different topic. I say it's not a different topic, but I count that as a separate point, because this runs across the spectrum, also voting. So I'm going to do a shout out to my ex-wife. She went to Georgetown for a master's. When I met her, both she and I had a undergrad campus presence. People knew who we were because of our activities in different organizations. She was president of Lambda. She was the president of the Women's Studies of Students Association. So she had very much a known record on campus as a very liberal, progressive-minded person. And here comes this boy who, at the time, was identified as a libertarian. And not saying maybe I don't identify myself, but other people identify me as that. A guy who debated, a guy who wrote columns in the campus paper. And so she's actually back home in Huntington, West Virginia, where she has a urban farm for addiction recovery. To help deal with the opioid addiction and deal with the job training skills, dealing with yoga and meditation, even using, was it Tai Chi? Using a martial art of some sort to help men and women both. I mean, she's working with I think I don't want to get the name wrong. Golden Girls is a home for abused women and so on, neglected women. So she's involved in that. That's what she's helping with. And so here's that woman on the left. And then I go to people who I went to high school with, some who are homeschooled and very much a conservative, the world needs to go back to the day of,
very much a God and guns kind of thing.
Well, yeah, very God and guns. But I'm going to say it's almost a neo-Luddite. Like she doesn't have Wi-Fi in her home. She has electricity, but there's no heat. It's done through wood.
Whoa.
Yeah. Her dad's a cabinet maker. I mean, she's a wonderful human. But the point is that she's on the right. That's what I'm getting to. And so the thing I found was the one on the right first said, like, where have all the men gone? And I was like, where have all the men gone? And I was pondering, because I'm going through my mind like, well, there's masculinity and there's men and males. There's a lot of male bodies. And so going through that process of what do you mean exactly? And what she's meaning is men who work, men who provide, men who are dominant in the way that's appealing. Obviously, not ones who batter and abuse, but there is a certain type of masculinity she's attracted to. And then I go and I talk to people across the spectrum, from some independents and people who don't vote at all to eventually over here the Jeannie. And I said that to her. I actually had a mention around. I said, Rachel said, where have all the men gone? She's like, oh, God, that's so true. She's like, where have they gone? She has no idea either. And that's the point of, because I want to give the point. Jeannie is in Cabell County, which they actually, if you go on the Netflix, they'll find a documentary called Heroin, which the E is in parentheses at the end.
Okay.
It's about the opioid addiction. It's actually in Huntington, which is my and Jeannie's undergrad hometown. And that's where we went to school in Marshall. And you follow these three women through this battle, and one is the fire chief. And the things that's pointed out is that 11% of that county has been or are on opioids or heroin. The amount of money that's going to, it's something in the millions. I think it's $100 million, something goes through that a year. And so what's fascinating is that a lot of these men aren't available because there are other things going on. There's a lack of education, but there's also a lack of motivation. And this leads into a whole other topic that I find with other men, is where the men I do talk to back home who are like, they're nervous. They're scared to talk to women. They're right. Scared of social interaction.
Because you might very well accidentally sexually harass someone or something, and then you're fucked for life.
Well, there's no...
it's not that you accidentally sexually harass someone. It's that you were joking, you thought flirting around or something, and it turns out that you're a monster.
Well, it's more of, well, yes. So the point, I think, goes back to, there's a book, and I do not condone the book because I've never read it, but I heard an interview on like NPR. It's called Manning Up. A woman wrote it about her like kids, and one thing she highlighted was in the 1950s, first of all, men aren't trained to understand other people on a personal level. The society has just failed to teach us interpersonal relationships, which they need to, and we should advance that cause. But in the 1950s and 40s, there was an expectation. This is what you do as a man. Women might not get what they want, but they knew what they're getting. And as you go through women liberation, and women started becoming more individual, and so you have some women who are into Tantra, and some are into BDSM, and you have others who are, as far as on the sexual level, but then you have others who they want to be stay-home moms, and others who want to be corporate, leaders. And all that's great and beautiful and advantageous in many respects, but it now puts a situation where these men don't know how to respond. There's no protocol for them to go out there and interact with these ladies. And this is what my friend was mentioning, was that there are, I don't know if I can say hi because I don't know how to say hi now. And of course, this is, and I hear from, from my academic female friends that, victimhood, who, just, it's like, honestly, can we just acknowledge that people just don't know how to interact and communicate? It's not for fear of being sexually harassing. It's just for fear of not knowing how to be turned down.
I see these posts sometimes by a particular friend I'm thinking of that is like this guy came over to me and was trying to buy me a drink or something, and I'm just sitting here drinking my coffee and reading a book. I'm like, what? Stop creeping on me, you asshole, right? I'm like, okay, that's fair. She didn't want to be bothered. And then like a week or two later, I also see the same friend saying, no one ever asks me out or hits on me. I am so alone. I'm like, these two might be related. People are afraid to approach people now because they don't want to be the creeper that everyone's like, oh, watch out for that guy. He'll come over and start annoying you when you don't want it.
Oh God, I forgot. I'm trying to think of how I phrased it to her. But mainly the issue was, how do I know that what I'm doing is being perceived as flirtatious versus being perceived as aggressive? And she's like, you won't know until she likes you. And that's the trouble.
And that's not worth the risk oftentimes.
And so this gets
you don't want to be aggressive so much that you don't bother with the flirting. You don't want to be the aggressive asshole. No one does.
So there thinking economically about this, there's actually two books that come to mind. One is I read it years ago called More Sex is Safer Sex.
Okay.
And it's really more of a theoretical thought experiment, but the idea is that if you want safer sex, let's say there's two kind of guys. There's the guy who he would like to have sex, and he's want to do it safe and want to be respectful. And then here is this other dude who just doesn't want to use protection, just want to go out with anybody, and will in night after night with different people. And then in the middle, you have this other lady who she'd prefer guy A, but if guy A leaves the market, she will give in to a guy B every so often. And so we need to find ways to incentivize guy A to enter the market. And what we're finding, or at least what I'm seeing from talking to people back in rural Appalachia, and even around here even, is that there is not that incentive. Everything is a disincentive for the good guy.
Well, they're trying to disincentivize guy B's from being like guy B's, but it doesn't stop guy B's, and it does stop guy A's from even showing up.
Yeah, and so you're the pool in which you're surrounding, and you're getting...
Although now I feel like the dickhole who's like telling women what their problem is.
No.
And I don't want to be in that position. Although I do want to say, do you think this idea that there are no good men left is what leads to the aggressiveness that you see from some of these women in workplaces? Like when you do see the one guy who looks like he might be a good guy, you got to jump and get on him, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm not sure exactly how strong that is. I did not speak to anyone directly on that level to have, but that makes sense to me though. And you're looking, because you're always out looking in those areas, looking for stability. I mean, remember, actually think about the first episode maybe of Mad Men. Like if you play your cards right, Peggy, you'll be living out in the the hills.
I couldn't even finish the first episode because it was so fucking misogynistic. I wanted to throw up.
I think that's part of the theme of the show.
I know it is, but that is the thing that is I hate so much. I could not swallow it, and I had to stop watching.
See, I'm gonna get shit on because I couldn't finish the first episode because I got bored. So
okay. Well, I mean, like some people like horror, and other people are like, I know that this is what a horror movie is, and I can't watch it. And that was the same kind of thing. I couldn't watch Mad Men.
And the sad thing is, that's my favorite TV show of all time.
And it's world renowned. I mean, people that I'm close to really liked it, but it's just I couldn't get into it. Now I feel like I would have to catch up on a lot, and they're long episodes. And I'm lazy.
Right. I mean, it's like getting caught up on Highlander. So
it's like what?
Getting caught up on Highlander.
Right. Yeah.
I was like, there's you got all the movies to watch, and also you have to watch the 6 seasons of the show, and then there's a 7th spin-off season.
And you got to watch Highlander 2, which is widely regarded as the worst movie ever.
But there's actually 3 or 4 different versions of it.
You got to watch the first one.
Oh my God.
No, they're aliens.
No. Wait, what? Don't watch the first one. The theatrical release was god awful, but I do like the Renegade version, which is the director's cut, and then also the producers came up with one. And there's a couple things I disagree with, but nonetheless, let's get off the movie Highlander. But I will say Highlander is probably one of the most influential things in the way I view being a man. So we might be interested to come back to that maybe at some point.
We'll put a pin in that.
Yeah,
I've never seen any Highlander.
So sad.
First one has Sean Connery in it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's only on the set for 7 days.
Oh.
Yeah, he was not in much of it.
But
So
here's a
do you mean Highlander the movie or Highlander the TV series?
both.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
But mainly the show has a lot of aspects to understanding the right amount of temperament that I find, at least for me, to want to exude. So, but with that, let's moving back to this point of what were you even saying?
I don't recall, but I do have some things I want to touch on before.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Like, somewhere along the way, we can edit it.
So yeah. So these are some things that you have said over the past couple months, I think, which I just started jotting down because I was like, I'm going to have them on my podcast, so I want to hit on some of these.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Someone actually pays that much attention to my Facebook other than either agreeing or disagreeing. I mean, like openly on the forum.
Okay, so we're going to hit 2 facts and a statement that you made in quick succession, and then we can talk about these. One was that non-Hispanic white males make up 31% of the U.S. population, but count for 70% of suicides. In the late 90s, the risk of a non-college white person dying in his or her early 50s was 30% less than that of his or her black counterpart, but by 2015, the risk was 30% more than his or her black counterpart.
Yeah.
And then you said, we live at a time where the left cannot fathom how everyone does not like the things they like and value the things they value, and the right preemptively expects for the things they like to be belittled, trashed, or looked down on, and the things they value to be judged quaint, old-fashioned, backwards, or stupid. My friends on the left do not see how they blindly fueled the rise of Trump, let alone continue to do so. Are these related things?
Oh, the facts and then this? Mm-hmm. I'm not. They're likely yes, because I'm not going to tie them together right now. But
yeah, they were kind of spread out.
They were spread out. They weren't. That wasn't one post.
No. That was over a series of weeks.
The issue of the facts is to understand that the type of men that are from where I'm from, to realize that we do have issues with suicide. We do have issues with depression, and we look at life expectancy, and that's the thing. 2 things with life expectancy. I actually just came across this the other day. A couple of the counties in my state, their life expectancy has decreased to the point where it is now equal to Ethiopia.
Wow.
And that's something that I don't think that people, back to the privilege a little bit, is that it's hard to tell someone who has a life expectancy of Ethiopia, who doesn't have a septic system because available to them when these kids go to besides when they go to school. I mean, they don't have the type of education to not education, but the opportunities to have a life that's going to put them on a path to getting out of that area.
They're stuck there forever, and they know it.
Yeah, and a lot of them know it. And so with that said, is more of my frustration is that people don't understand exactly what's going on, at least back to statistically, with rural America, in the sense that there is a male divide, as in there's a group of males who are getting healthier, and there's a group of males who are getting less healthy or getting poor. And the main thing is with the line about the white men living 30, what was the years again?
in the late 1990s.
Yeah, so late 1990s, I had a
30% less chance of dying than their black counterpart.
at the certain age, like early 50s. And of course, it has a lot to do with drug usage, particularly with opioids, is what's doing a lot of that. But to underscore, that's not a tide lifting all boats. And that's where where a lot of people looking around, like, who had issues where with not affirmative action, but like, exactly, but the policies that kept telling, like, these people who were disenfranchised. And you're not watching yourself get better. You're watching yourself getting worse in response.
And that breeds some sort of anger, I would imagine.
And there's a sense of being left behind, feeling ignored. And that's something that's really fascinating when you talk to people in like McDowell County or Clay County, some of the poor counties in my state, or even getting further south even, that they don't expect a politician to come through to save them. They don't expect a politician to even know they exist. They do feel that they're on their own. And so it's a little bit more about this community thing, is that the aspect of this, and going to the friend who talked about not knowing how to discuss things with women, is that the other thing he said, besides not having a protocol for communicating with the opposite sex, is there's no place to get together anymore. There's not a dance hall. There's not a nice place to have dinners, or there's not a place to go to sports games. These things are falling to the side. And what I'm finding from talking to people is that a lot of the behavior, a lot of choices, particularly when it comes to voting, is that these men who are working at a plant, be it deliveries or be it poultry, be it cabinets, be whatever they're making. I mean, there's we got so many different plants in operation in West Virginia. We make van shoes. We also make coal.
Coal.
No, well, we do make coal. We dig it up, but I was the charcoal. We make charcoal, and so there's a host of things going on there. But as far as the job aspect, a lot of these men, and the concern comes from not just about their own livelihood. Some of them have like made things like to go on into other occupations. A lot of niches. I have a friend who's doing leather work now. He got out of work, and he now had to figure out a thing to do. So he's selling leather bags and leather belts and out of a shed. And you have other people who are making knives, custom knives, selling it, and they're using the internet to do a lot of this too. So they see the benefits in one way, but they're concerned about their community. So when people talk, even for me, when I heard the line like back with Trump was "Make America Great Again," I did go to that liberal response, like back when there was slavery and inequality, and you had high tariffs and strong unions to the degree that you were actually slowing economic growth in places. You had little say as part of the franchise.
Well, one of the perks of that tagline was that "great again" can mean whenever the listeners thinks it is, right? So
it's vague. It's totally meant to let you fill in the blanks. And that's the thing. When I did go to that liberal perspective, I went with a lot of where my academic friends were going. To these people, they're not asking for the racism back. They're not asking for even the same type of work. A lot of times, they're just asking for their communities. They're asking for a place that you could raise a kid without worrying about drugs, and some place where they can have just a place, not just the main street, but a liveliness. Because my hometown, for an example, up until the 80s, actually had a bluegrass festival. Small town, but it was a place. You had big bluegrass names come through. My grandfather sat and talked to many of them. And though he doesn't play an instrument, his love of music is what got me into playing music. It was very much that like how can I how can I encourage you, Josh, to pick up an instrument? And he had all these stories, and he knew what good music was. But the point is, you had a community for there. And then when I was there, you had a certain family that was available. You had the older generation that played music. Then so he took me out to play with them on Saturday nights. At a guy's trailer. He had a microphone set up. The whole kitchen was moved out to be a concert, little stage. And they played traditional country music, and so then on Sunday, and then on their nephews and niece would play bluegrass on Saturday, on Sunday. On Sunday.
And now there's nothing like that anymore.
There was this one family that held that bluegrass together from the 80s, where you had a community of rock bands playing into the 80s, and then they left, and then you had the bluegrass that hung on, and then now that's gone. And so,
and I think it seems like part of why I tied in that other comment was that it's not just that there is no future for them and life keeps getting worse, and it seems that nobody cares at all. It's not just that nobody cares. They don't expect people to care. It's that the people, when they do talk about them, denigrate them. They're like, get out of your shitty town. Stop being a racist assholes. Get with the times, or you deserve to be left behind. Like the "you deserve to be shat on" thing is,
right.
I think,
and
what
so
angers
that's
a lot
where
of people.
the left can be good at that. Is because they're very good at moralizing things.
Right.
And
well, I mean, so is the right at times.
Right, but the
Seen
thing,
the moral majority.
Well, but in this case, talking about this particular group of people, about what Hillary was like. Yeah, she talked about helping bring in new jobs, and retraining, but she forgot the identity aspect of community. A lot of that retraining would go to people who don't have the same skill set. So we're actually like, we can bring in jobs, but we're not going to have the same workers filling those jobs. And so, and there's that big concern about brain drain. And honestly, if there were, Southern Virginia, Northern Tennessee, West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania, they're in Ohio now. If their kids are going somewhere, they're going to Cincinnati, Columbus. They're moving and this is also why Ohio is booming in many respects. They have a governor who is working well enough to with promoting R&D, promoting job growth, retraining, and being very active on that as a pro job person, a pro retraining person, but giving opportunities to people. And the brain drain is not from rural Appalachia to the big cities. I'm a rare one going this far west. They're just going across the river because they want to be close to home. They want to be close to their families.
So with your current econ degree, is there, and I realize this is a tangent and we are getting off the Trump thing, but is there any hope for these small areas to be revitalized, or is it just an area of America that is dying and everyone is going to eventually have to move to cities? Like, there's really nothing in the modern economy that can be made of value in those small areas now, right?
Not really. Transportation costs has gone down so dramatically. This is also why back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, you had to have your steel mills in the middle of the city, like Pittsburgh.
Oh.
Now we can put those outside of towns. We can put them 30, 40, 50 miles, if not even 2 hours away from their source. My hometown's a poultry town. We have 2 poultry plants, middle of nowhere. Seriously. When I was a kid, I had to go to a movie, to go to an actual theater, to a mall, meant to go to Maryland, which meant to drive an hour and 15 minutes. And that was a big thing. To go to a good hospital was to go to Virginia, and that was another hour and 15 minutes. We had a regional hospital, but if you weren't going to deliver babies
to go to a good hospital, I got to drive for an hour too. It's just that it's only 20 miles away from me.
Well, there's a great distance. You're driving at 65 miles an hour to these places, still not getting there in time. But keeping more of the points that these, no, that's actually not a lot of the problem. The thing, there's mindset issues. My grandfather's mayor of my hometown. And understanding the importance of systems, and we maybe get around to that later, because I think in terms of systems a lot because of economics. Mm-hmm. But with it, my county is like the second fastest growing county in the state, and it has a lot to do with my hometown. The other incorporated town in the county has a part-time officer. It's dying, and it's dying because it was completely agricultural, and they refused to do anything other than hospitality. And they eventually lost the hospitality. No offense, if they're listening. I
don't think our podcast has that kind of reach.
But with that said, my hometown is industrial. It's very cosmopolitan. We have a lot of influx of Hispanics from all over Latin America, from the Caribbeans, and so it's actually a very beautiful thing to look at that in many respects. So what I bring it is that my grandfather is very thoughtful on what his role as a mayor, and also understanding the fact that the charter for the town is set up in a way that the mayor doesn't have a lot of power. It's the board, or the council. It's the council. But the people have voted in consistently people onto this council who are actually fairly educated, with a lot of experience in management, They, so there's not a person on that board that doesn't have a degree less. Sorry, my grandfather has the lowest amount of degrees on that board, or the council, excuse me, and that's what's funny though.
Is he still pro-Trump?
No, my grandfather he's very lukewarm.
Okay. But even though your town's doing very well, it sounded like they were still very much in the Trump
No, the
category.
town is, yes.
Yeah.
But my grandfather's a little different breed.
Okay.
But what I'm getting to is this, that thinking in terms of who's actually running the town and keeping it on pace. They're making decisions that are not anti-business, but not pro-business. They're making decisions that how do we work together as partnerships? Because the poultry plants together, both of them make up 85% of the water usage. The town produces all the water for the region, and they sell it. They sell it at cost to anyone outside of the town. So the making points here is that they're thinking systematically. And so when you get to Trump, this is where a lot of people are not concerned so much with the Trump that the left knows. That's the other thing that's very important.
Yeah.
So we think in terms of systems, but with how towns are run and so on. But wanting to keep on the Trump thing a little bit more is that these people are, they know Trump has faults. They know that he tweets. They're not oblivious to it. But that's not the Trump they're concerned with.
So this is what I really wanted to dive into, and I haven't really said anything in the last 35 minutes. I want to understand the, so like for really quick, my background is like, I have immediate family members who voted Trump, and they voted not for the reality TV show host, the, proud, I've never read a book because I'm already so smart, or the flagrant sexual offender. They voted for the guy that, in one case, wasn't Hillary Clinton, no matter what.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's a big thing.
And the other one was just he's not a politician. That's what makes him good. And people liked that too, because they or at least in my small circle, or my small window into this world, that, what have politicians done for us lately? They fucked everything up for the last 50 years. We need to shake things up. And is that anything like the common narrative in real Trump land, or?
Well, there's some appeal to the non-politician aspect, but but you talk to these people and they understand that you need people who know how things work. I think more of them had better view of what his cabinet was going to look like. A lot of things I hear about where I'm from often. Excuse me. Something I hear a lot from where I'm from is it's really about who you surround yourself with. That's the big thing. And they assumed Trump was going to have better people. And honestly, some of them are not bad people. I'm actually kind of lamenting McMaster's leaving, keeping a little bit more sane, a little bit more sanity around. But at the same time, there are some issues with McMaster's too. So, but with that said, is that the example of where they weren't looking for Trump as being a non-politician alone. They were looking for someone who seemed to come and talk to them and not talk down them. And this is read that second part there about the belittling. From that comment, please.
We live at a time where the left cannot fathom how everyone does not like the things they like and value the things they value, and the right preemptively expects for the things they like to be belittled, trashed, or looked down on, and the things they value to be judged quaint, old-fashioned, backwards, or stupid.
Yeah, and that's the big thing that I find is that there's not the big thing, but a big thing, is that the right is on defensive. The rural America is on defensive. And so someone who was sticking to the system, regardless if it came from the system or not, that was really secondary. It was just someone who was not talking down to them, and Trump was not. Much as he looked like a goofball being, in my state with a coal miner's cap on, and it didn't fit, and trying to look like he was shoveling out of a sandbox. That should have been an insult, and that would have been an insult if Hillary did it. But Hillary would have come across as doing it out of mockery. Trump did it out of a sense of praise. And that's what these people really respond to, was not being talked down to for once. And this is the thing that also is clever. The end of clever is something I hear a lot. Trump is the end of clever. And not
you say the end of clever.
Yeah. So let's talk about a more economic point of view is all the money that's offshore have to come back to be taxed. And look at Google and Apple, for example, and they want to do a holiday, and Trump's a 10% tax rate on that. 10% is a nice round number kind of thing. It's easy to comprehend at least. Paul Ryan comes out a few weeks later and says, no, it should be actually 12.5. Now you're like, wait a second, where'd you get that from? So 10 is easy to understand. 12.5 is like, what math are you using? and so the point is they want to cut. People are tired of being talked down to and lectured and preached to and whatever else. So with this, at least from where I'm from, I mean, I don't think anyone likes any of that, honestly. Mm-hmm. And this will get to another point about this, how people, what led to this reactionary state of the right or rural America. But the end of clever is very important. The idea of like, let's cut out a bunch of excess, even if it's going to be with an axe or a chainsaw. And then in 8 years, we will then go back to rebuilding. They just want to gut the red tape. They want to. They feel that even if we know economically, a lot of the regulations are actually beneficial. For many things. Yes, there are some costs, but then the costs also a lot of times pay for themselves elsewhere. So we can look at these studies, but that's not the narrative these people have. And that's this narrative. Man, there's like 500 things in my mind right now to go from that direction. But with narrative, it's horribly important to understand these people. And so the left often talks about they're voting against their own self-interests. We're the ones wanting to give you good jobs. We want, government can give you these opportunities and redistribute through the tax system, give you benefits. How can you vote against your interest? Well, these people, and not just in Appalachia, but also in Louisiana, for example. There's a sociologist out of California. She wrote a book called Strangers in Their Own Land. And what she really got to was that to them, and it's very true across rural America, businesses are not the enemy. They are the things that give you money to put food on the table for your kids. They are the saviors. And every time you add a regulation, you are making it harder for you to get an income. Every time government makes a regulation, it makes it hard for you to have an income. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're seeing. That's a narrative. Even if we know coal was actually going down long before Obama came in. The war on coal is very much,
Is that a big narrative out there?
Oh, God, yes. I very much applaud my state on the fact that we have a lot of windmills. We've taken a route to do some version of alternative energy. Granted, windmills are not efficient in any meaningful sense. I mean, they are technology from the 1500s. That's at best. I mean, like we're going to say, we'll give if not back in the 1100s. So they're not exactly the future. Now that gets into a totally different issue with the alternatives, but I'm glad we're doing that. We're at least showing some aspect of having those kind of jobs available. And a lot of engineering, electrician jobs are created with that. But the war on coal, and is a very big narrative. And realizing that states have identities. When you're from a state, I never identify as a coal miner. I don't think of coal myself personally as an important thing. I mean, it's a fuel, it's an energy. But my grandmother is a coal miner's daughter. My brother, my uncles are coal miners. One was a president of a coal company. Worked his way up from in high school digging coal to owning the company, and winning awards for environmental practices, because you can do that too. So taking into account that I did come from a family of coal miners, but it was back in my grandmother's generation. It's with her siblings that I learned about these, going to family reunions with them. I'm not exactly someone who cares about the past. And this is my grandfather's influence. He's a very non-nostalgic person. And so that's what I learned from him, was that that's a past energy. Gasoline, the combustion engine should have been gone in the 70s to him. We need to be moving into other technologies. But he's also the guy who thinks that the worst thing the government ever did was not fund NASA at the same rate as it was during the 60s. So, again, your
grandfather sounds like a cool guy.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say. Anyone who thinks the space program doesn't earn enough that's a point in my book.
Well, he's a guy who thinks. Okay, so I think my grandfather would have been a great economist, actually, because when I was in 7th grade, we had to build a bridge in our we have a little river that goes through a little creek, a branch, whatever you want to call it, and through the middle of the town. And so we built a bridge in like 94, and then come 97, we had to build a new one. And they're like, "Why? This is a waste of money." And so I'm in 7th grade in a class, and I'm in a group, and this one kid made a statement about how wasteful it was. And my grandfather picks me up from school, and we're driving across the bridge right after class. And I said something about, "Why did we build this bridge?" And I said, "We're talking about this in class." He said, "Did your teacher say it?" And I was like, "No, it was so and so." And he's like, "Oh, that's just his dad talking." And he goes through and he explains to me why we had to build the bridge, why it was based on an investment due to the fact that we were building a dike because we had a flood in 96, and thus we had to raise the bridge. And going through the steps and explaining there's multiple layers here. And so what happens a lot of times is people are stage 1 thinkers. It's what's directly in front of them. And so he is very good at trying to think out these extra links. And so he sees NASA as a huge investment in technology. And it's because it's the spinoffs. It's all about the spinoffs, and that's the same with funding research and R&D. I mean, this is a man who.
We're starting to run low on time. I was wondering, you posted, I think this was recently, about the populists just won again in Italy.
They did.
Yes. You seem to you were saying something along the lines of no one seems to realize that this is a problem or what to do about it. Or, well, no, people realize it's a problem, but you were saying something along the lines of when will the left wake up? And
I don't use the phrase "wake up," but much as I like Sam Harris, that's a horrible book title.
Okay,
because he kind of stole it from Glenn Beck, and Glenn Beck stole it from every other person before him.
Hey, they stole it from the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah,
we had a magazine called Awake.
I don't know any of those other references, but I think the book Waking Up was about raising your consciousness through meditation. That sounds somewhat appropriate, at least for
I think waking
usage.
up has been a common metaphor ever since humans started waking up from sleep.
Sure. And all the kids these days are saying woke, like it's some risen
Woke and
consciousness
lit,
level.
yeah.
But yeah.
All the things you got to learn from, you got to go and like talk to your 14-year-old sister to figure out what they mean.
I learned I was old when I started using Urban Dictionary. So, what the fuck did she just say? Oh man, now I'm old.
So two things with the populist. One, I agree with Niall Ferguson on this one that Trump is not a fascist, and the left if they believe he is, they have misdiagnosed what they're up against. He's a right-wing populist. Which
you can be both, though. A lot of fascists start out with populism.
A lot of fascists.
I mean,
appeal
the
to
first fascist was a populist, right?
Well, that was the fascist appeals to certain populist instincts, but a populist, at least in the American sense, and most of European as well, have been pretty much buried in their own weight of bad policy. When we look back to because the response to
well, it's not like populism is known for good policy either.
No, it's all for feel goods, and that's where the issue is. Like there should never be a concern. Well, in the long run, about populism winning.
You don't think?
Well, I'm wishful thinking. Because the reason I say that is that, on the Niall Ferguson perspective is that there's no reason in the long run because the policies can't sustain themselves.
Mm.
Well, I guess what does winning look like? Does winning look like a 6 million person genocide? That seems like a populist. I mean, I'm not a historian, but I mean that looks like if it wasn't winning, it was certainly a hard price to the populists losing, right?
Right. I mean, ultimately, sure, Venezuela is going to go down in flames or whatever, but you don't want to get to
Venezuela is a left-wing populism. If we're going to diagnose as a populist, and there's other aspects of Venezuela. I wouldn't use populism.
You say in the long run, populism can't win, and okay, that's fair, but you don't want to go through the
you don't want to
going down phase.
Exactly, no. And this is where the progressives saved us in the late 1800s. The progressive movement, I look at the idea in the U.S., back to systems, the movements that created our institutions and the systems in which we operate under are basically two. And that is the Enlightenment that created us as a country and the basic institutional framework, and then the progressives who came in and built other institutions to buttress the Enlightenment.
And these are the late 1800 progressives?
Late 1800 progressives and early 1900s.
I know nothing about them.
I mean, they're basically the people who got water to the towns. They got crime down in the cities. They were the ones who made the Federal Reserve. They were the ones who did an income tax that were able to finance improvements in the economy.
We should. I would like to at some point, if you have the time, like just do an episode on the progressive history.
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan of actually the radical Republicans, because the progressives were the Republicans, and after that's when you look at Lincoln. Lincoln wasn't a conservative. He might have been an opportunist at early stages, but he was, he came out of the progressive. I mean, you look at the political writings leading up to the Civil War, and you see the multiple parties that fell into the Republican Party. They were pushing a pretty progressive agenda at the time, and then the Republicans that followed after that were like the ones who were creating the middle class and getting crime down and getting water taken care of for cities. So what I'm getting to with the story is when you get so popular, so the left needs to be conscious of they once won this battle by being progressive. And the thing that right now, and I'm going to use Sam Harris, and I lost his name. British Muslim reformer.
Majid Nawaz.
Majid. Yeah. Progressive. The progressives and the regressives have not been dealt with yet, as far as parting the two. And this is where my issue with I don't want to get good. So every movement needs to have to regulate itself. And we can look at feminism gets a bad name because of the few bad feminists. Well, the feminism as a movement needs to extricate these people from the movement and make a very hard line. That's not acceptable. And the same thing with progressives. Progressives need to realize regressives are in their fold, and they need to move these people out of it. And a lot of them haven't yet come to that term yet, surprisingly to me. I think it's, but so with that. What I'm concerned with is that the left doesn't seem to really acknowledge, one, their solutions that they have in their back pocket to use, and they don't also understand how bad they're losing. I don't know the number as of right now due to the last special elections, but just last year, if you looked at the state houses and the governorships that were completely controlled by Republicans or by Democrats, only 6 to 7 states had complete control by Democrat. Republicans on their hand had like 17, 20.
I do remember hearing a lot of that. Democrats were getting really concerned that all the local elections and local boards were being taken by Republican candidates.
And so the Republicans are saying something that people are responding to. And maybe not in certain pockets throughout the country, not like Northern Virginia or out here in any metropolitan area, but the Democrats need to broaden their base as an understanding that people are being hurt in other parts and they're not being heard. And so how do you respond to that? And they have the solutions. If they look to the past and then they think of how to apply them to the present, it's not, of course it's difficult, but it's not, they don't have to forfeit the field. And I think in many respects, what we got with, no offense, I don't know how anyone in the room voted, but Bernie he's a left-wing populist. He was not a progressive. And the fact that the media portrayed him as a progressive.
Everyone knows that he's a left-wing populist, right?
No, Anderson Cooper hasn't figured this one out yet. Anderson, you have CNN saying that did Bernie make Hillary more progressive? It's like, no. He made her more populist, going to a base on an emotional level, which she seems to be incapable of doing, emotional attachment to people. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like I'm bashing on Hillary. I don't mean to. I mean, she's...
Well, so you think the way to combat this takeover of populism is through more like traditional progressive?
Yeah, I think I'm interested. Yeah, because this is the people... So, for
example, what is
the
traditional progressive policies?
I think so. Back it up a little bit for a moment. Roseanne was recently re-aired. You saw that?
No. I mean, I heard about it.
Yeah. Did you see how many people turned in for it?
No, I have no idea.
18 million people turned in to watch a sitcom.
Is that a lot?
Yes. In this day and age, just sit down and watch it. Yeah. There's a nostalgia factor. It is Roseanne. And it's from the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. Mm-hmm. But the thing about the show that got my attention is that the promotion. So her and John Goodman went on Jimmy Kimmel. And Jimmy Kimmel is riding her a little bit like, you're a liberal person. What happened? And she's like, I didn't change, you did. You kept moving. And the one thing that I don't think the left has really grasped how much is that they have moved. A lot of them, they think I'm the sane one. I'm the one who has always stood for the right thing, and I've done the same thing, and the right has gotten more radical. The right has moved to the right. That's no dissident. But the left has moved too. My grandfather's a great example of someone who, as a conservative, a Democrat, but he's like he wasn't conservative. He voted for Kennedy. He was that kind of guy. He's a Kennedy Democrat, and then the party kept moving away from him. So that's a cliche at this point, but I want people to pay more attention to how much their views are not lined up with where everyone else is, because we live in a country where you are in a society. You have to think about what's effective. If every position I take is only for what makes me think is best, doesn't mean I'm going to lose. I'd rather make some compromises somewhere. I'd rather have a guy in Pennsylvania be a Democrat and vote against Pelosi or whoever he says he's going to vote against, but still have someone who has an active voice, and that's how the Democrats are going to win at this point. Having progressives available. And so the reason I said the idea of progressive in more of an old school progressive, sounds ridiculous to say it that way, but is the importance of these are things people are comfortable with right now, and giving them more new and more extreme is not something that people are comfortable with. And a lot of the back to the system aspect is that people talk a lot about gerrymandering. Yeah, I'm fine with gerrymandering. And talking to people back home, there's actually no one really cares.
Huh?
Gerrymandering is not an issue.
Really?
What? Because gerrymandering for most states, where they have, of course, there are politically you have situations where we are disrupting this and that, and but particularly for a state like West Virginia, you have three districts, and they're broken up by industry. The north is lumber. And type of work. Down the south is coal, and in the middle is commerce. So it runs right through the center from the Eastern Panhandle down through the capital. So keep it in line with the idea that.
I don't want to get into gerrymandering because that's a larger topic, and we're almost out of time.
I don't want to talk about gerrymandering. I'm saying the thing is, it's more important, and what these people see that I talked to back in Appalachia is the primary system. And this is backed up by, there's even 538 that talks about this. If you want a bigger bang for your buck, the primary system. Mm-hmm. And so, back when my grandfather was old enough to remember when to work for the state road, you had to be of the party of who's in power.
Huh.
Yeah.
That sounds kind of corrupt.
Sounds weird, right?
Yeah.
But that's how it worked back in the day. And so, moving forward now that unions have lost their sway, yes, but the parties have lost theirs. This starts with the Democrats in 1968.
Yeah, election. I wanted to ask you about this because this is something you posted, which I felt not personally attacked by, but you said that policy is the purview of parties. And so if you are not part of a party, you are removing your voice from the, and that, I mean, because I've recently stepped away from the feminist group as a general grouping, and I have always been independent my entire life, even though I've voted Democrat in almost every single election and position that I can think of. I don't like parties. And you're saying that I am basically disenfranchising myself by not being part of a party.
Absolutely.
Can you explain that? Why is that policy?
Because, who makes policy?
Lawmakers?
No.
Well, I guess.
Think tanks. So the people who propose policy come through parties. They come through think tanks providing a federal level, and then of course you have some party issues that people pick up on at a state level. But mainly you have to have people doing the research, giving you the numbers, giving you the arguments as a politician. So the legislation is built out of what the academics, which is funneled through the think tanks. And so if you don't have a sway to it, even if you might be a middle of the road person, you're not going to have any impact if you're not a part of the system. As in the system is Democrat, Republican. You might have some libertarian people who will use a Cato argument, somewhere along the way. But yeah, so when you're not a part of a party, you don't have a say in what policy happens. And what the bigger thing I find is, as the middle's gotten larger.
You don't have a say even if you are part of a party. It's all the elites that make the decisions. You can just vote for one party or the other, and they both suck.
But you're not tempering the edges. You are not signaling to the Republicans that they need to stay moderate. They don't need to go so culture war about who kneels at a football game. And you don't need to be on the left saying that, putting a cancer warning on Starbucks coffee is kind of stupid, California. I mean, like, this is the extremism. I mean, so what happens is as the right moves to the right and the left moves to the left, and this is back to the party. This is the election process, the primary process. As we keep moving on to the radicals or the more devotees of the party, and because moved further to the right, now the people who are more moderate in the party move to the center as independent, and there's a nobleness to being moderate, and actually not moderate, but being independent. Back up. So there's a nobleness to being independent. It's one thing to be moderate. It's another thing to be independent. And so by disfranchising yourself voluntarily, by not being in a party, you're not signaling to the people in power through your vote, and you're also not having any say if you're going to be in the policy realm about what's concerned.
But if the people in the power just expect my vote anyway,
no. I think about Barney Frank. Barney Frank was asked this question about, what was the biggest fear he had? Like, who did he? He's like, my constituents. I answered to no of my constituents. And this being a person who worked in D.C. and knows quite a few politicians who were there working in the think tanks, it is a misnomer to think that the parties, not parties, but the politicians are bought by corporate interest or bought by lobbyists. Mm-hmm. It's much more values, and because they're concerned about getting reelected. And no matter how much money someone gives you, you're not going to get elected if you vote against what your constituents want.
But how the hell do you tell your
town hall meetings? If you're a voting Democrat or a voting Republican, hey, I'm
want to go to town hall meetings. They're such a pain in the ass.
They are. But you're vocalizing your concern, and this is where I think understanding civics, not to you per se, but the way a voter has the ability to say, "Here's my values and here are my concerns." Think tanks offer up. Well, actually, politicians go back to think tanks and through whatever members of their staff that say, these are the values and concerns. Now, find reasons or ways that we can do this.
I think, tying back to what Stephen and me were talking about before you showed up, this would be one of those great reasons to have a homemaker contract person. Like, because I don't want to go to fucking town hall meetings, but maybe if someone else doesn't mind, they can handle that for the household.
Like a representative to go to town hall meetings for you.
You're right.
Like
representing the family unit here. Yeah.
We're going to do a caucus thing. But the main thing is you have to show that you're a voting member and that you're going to be valued in the primary, and you got to then voice your values and concerns. And temper people's views, like the issue, about trade and with China, with doing tariffs. I mean, this is something that, much as I despise Trump for doing it, and I think I know it's a faulty policy. Obama did it. Bush did it. This is not out of the norm for presidents to do this, and they do it because they have to appease the voters. Obama did it because he put tariffs on cheap tires from China.
Yeah.
And in doing that, we cost I
heard like $3 billion or something.
Well, it's nearly something like that. But I was going to say that but in doing that,
thousands of jobs too.
Yeah, thousands. Oh God, thousands. Because it was meant to save 1,000 tire jobs in Ohio. He made a campaign promise, and this is the other thing. We actually track this. Politicians do keep their campaign promises more times than not. This is something that go to political scientists, and they do studies on this. And so keep maybe bringing this back is that my hometown was going to be affected by that because China was attempting a trade war response with tariffs on chicken feet, random thing, but they didn't do it. But now we see a little more of this because it's more aggressive. Steel is a bigger export for China than tires were.
I hate to do this, but we did get started a little late, and I kind of have to wrap things up here in the next few minutes.
Okay. I feel like we've got a round 2 in the works.
Would you be willing to come back for a second round? Talk about some other things in the future?
Totally. I feel I get long-winded. I mean, the big thing at the end of the day is like trying to encapsulate these things in conversation. It's not about here's my bullet point. Here's wrapping these things to people in general. And what is their stories, what are their narratives? And so trying to exemplify that in some regards right now. So yes, that'd be fine.
I do feel like we have learned quite a bit more about you personally too, as you were saying with the narratives and talking to people. Well, and that's the big thing. There's so many more. I mean, there's people talking. Yeah, God, there's so many things I talk to people about back home. Not just the Me Too movement, not just about Trump as explicitly about his tweeting per se.
and about where have all the men gone. There's a lot more that these people talk about, and a lot more about community that matters to these people. And it's weird altruism, and I hate the word altruism, but there is a sense of altruism out of it that people are not concerned about.
What do you mean?
People, they're not, so they can be doing well. This is actually going a little back to this about the guys making knives out of their, and leather work. These people are not concerned about their jobs anymore. They have found the way to survive. What they're concerned about is their community. And they're concerned about the guy down the street. They're concerned about they don't have a kid in high school anymore, but they're concerned about the kids in high school. Their kid graduated and moved out, but they're concerned about, the football team, members, about keeping their nose clean, not tearing down Christmas lights. So I had an English teacher in high school who got the book thrown at him, and a bunch of the football players did something ridiculous like that. But great man, they hit him hard, and he grew up quickly, and was one of the best teachers I've ever had in high school. But point being the story is that it's also understanding narrative, and people grow, and there's redemption. That's a big thing. Also, I find a lot people believe in redemption, and they believe in nuance much more in rural America than people give them credit for. So much of what I come across by having conversations, you realize that no one really supports anything 100%. In any position you support, sometimes it could be 55. And you see this with drug idea of legalization of marijuana in Appalachia. Not a lot of people really support it. There's people who support it, but I'm saying there's a good vocal side who have an argument. Kind of very similar to John Kasich's, which is it's hard to tell kids don't do drugs while legalizing other drugs. Well, it's back to narrative. How do you pitch this?
All right. I think all the drugs should be legalized and teach the kids what happens when you use them.
Well, that's my grandfather was very much about bringing home brochures of this is what happens, or here's a photo of a guy we brought in. It was on meth last week.
I mean, we already have legalized alcohol, which is one of the more dramatically bad for you drugs.
There's a cultural significance with this. Is another thing back to narrative. There's a cultural significance with alcohol that's different than a cultural significance with heroin, or with cocaine,
right?
And so.
But in terms of just effects on your body, alcohol is pretty high up there.
No, but again, this is back to think again. Statistics and reports do not convince people.
Okay. Damn.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
It was not related.
Well, one last thing, I guess maybe this is not about rural Appalachia, but talking about narrative. So I write for a site called Erraticus.co. If you want to go and check it out. There's a lady who wrote on it a piece about when she was in Africa during the Ebola crisis. And the importance of medical aid and medicine in general is overshadowed. I'm going to back that up. So I'm going to far go back in the story. Mainly narrative matters. And so the lady wrote an article about when she was in Africa with the Ebola crisis, and you have all the medical treatment available and doctors, and trying to get people vaccinated or trying to get people quarantined and other different things, and without a narrative to tell people why they need to care about the facts and they need to care about the medicine, they need to care about their own health, without caring about their children, without a narrative, medicine didn't work. And so they had to develop this narrative structure as aid workers to provide the medicine and the Ebola treatment available to these people. And the same thing with Latin America, with rural Appalachia. Nothing has hurt credibility of doctors like the opioid crisis. This is another thing of experts failing us. I have a friend who's in a band, and
we really got to go.
Okay.
Now. I'm sorry. All right, go ahead. Quick.
Okay.
If you can do it quick.
I have a friend in the band, and it's a local band, and they're very popular around the area, and they have a song called "White Coat Man," and it's all about how doctors have hurt the rural population. So this is a very big thread right now. Is experts are failing, and not just in Africa, but also in rural Appalachia.
Yeah.
And so narrative's important to get everyone out of this. And so facts is not going to do it. Statistics isn't. It's conversation and narrative.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that like you said, the story that people have for themselves and for what drives their beliefs is what really matters. It's not, they didn't hear a statistic on the news and that's why they believe what they believe. They have this whole underpinning thing. And there's this line that there's this line that every racist voted for Trump, but not every Trump voter is a racist, right? They're not all tiki torch wielding Nazis. Don't get me wrong, none of the tiki torch wielding Nazis voted for Clinton, but the overwhelming majority of Trump voters are just people who, aren't villains in most of our eyes, but they're so they have stories that make sense for themselves, and sort of the Nazis, but the stories that the not tiki torch people have for their motivations are the kinds of things that we can almost all find common ground on. You find something in the middle and be like, hey, I care about that too. I don't want you dying of opioid addiction. I don't want you losing your job. I don't want your society falling apart, that sort of stuff. And there's a huge collection of everything that we all can care about together, right? And I think I like humanizing people that we tend to disagree with, right? It's really easy, especially if you're on the far left, to be like, everyone over there is a monster, and they all wish they had swastikas tattooed on their foreheads or whatever. It's like, no, they're just people like you and me. They just their values aligned a little differently from their narrative history, right?
Yeah, and that's the same for us. I mean, of course, we look from the right to the left, and everyone wants to take your guns. So, yeah, it's very much of my sister and her husband voted for Trump, but they're not homophobic. They're not anti-Semitic. They voted for not being talked down to. And a lot of people, they looked at voting for Trump as an end of PC and censorship, not about his policies, not about his rhetoric itself, but about what Hillary responded to, or we're talking about what Hillary represented. And that's very similar to thinking about what would a Hillary presidency look like, and the counterfactual. And I don't think a lot of people talk about this. Sam Harris had
there hasn't been time, yeah.
and so when you think about what the opportunity is, these people saw that, and maybe just not being talked down to for 4 years might help them. And there's a release valve of energy. But you're lumping people that I know who have the same values as I do, who disagree on basic, like 25% here, 5% there, and then they voted the other way for someone who doesn't respect, in my mind, the rule of law, doesn't respect the norms of the office or the dignity of the office, doesn't have basic economics on its side. But with that said, they're not bad people. They agree on so many things. Back to the Me Too thing, they agree there should not be sexual harassment in the workplace. They just don't see the narrative that's coming across their Facebook thread or through the media as in the one that reflects their reality. So there's a lot more agreement, but what we're doing is we are painting people in one brush and say you're a Nazi or you are a fascist, and we're not actually getting much done from that.
Before we go, is there anything you would like to plug? Someplace people can hear your music, or that website you were just talking about?
So there's a website that I write for. My buddy started from DC called erraticus.co. It's just long-form essays on varying topics. There's a host of writers. They actually just opened up a poetry section recently. So
we will link that on the blog.
Yeah, cool. And besides that, no, I haven't got my Flowcast up yet on YouTube. I'm working on it though.
Cool. Hopefully by the time you come back.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on, man. I want to do this again if you're available.